To the show. Thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
Now, you are the secretary for the GI Forum, which is
A Latino veterans organization that was started in 1947 when returning veterans at that time were really basically Mexican American veterans were not allowed to really join the other mainstream veterans organizations because of discrimination.
Now, I noticed that it says on your business card here that it is the American GI Forum.
Yes.
Is that different than the GI Forum?
No, it's the same thing.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
Now, you were telling me a story the other day about Mexican Americans who have served in the military, but when this one particular gentleman was...
Yeah, it was a Private Felix Longoria. In 1947, he was a World War II veteran that had gotten killed in the Philippines. When he returned home, he was not allowed burial in Three Rivers, Texas, because he was Mexican. And at that time, they had separate cemeteries. But what they wanted to do was have a wake at the funeral home, and he wasn't allowed to do that. So at that time, the Senator Lyndon Johnson, along with the founder of the GI Forum, who was Hector P. Garcia, got him to be able to be buried in Arlington Cemetery. Unfortunately, what the wife had really wanted was for him to be buried in his home state in Three Rivers. But he was buried with full military honors at Arlington Cemetery, and that's really was the impetus of what started the GI Forum. What people don't realize is that a lot of the mainstream veterans organizations at that time really did not allow black veterans or Mexican American veterans to be part of their organizations. In fact, the American Legion, up until 1975, did not allow Vietnam veterans in.
Well, I was going to ask you, at one point in time, they had the Tuskegee Airmen, and that was African Americans serving in a completely different branch of the service. Was it the same for Mexican Americans as well?
No, it wasn't, because at that time, we were still considered Caucasian, so we were integrated into the military, whereas the African American soldiers, black soldiers, really weren't integrated into the military until 1948 when Harry Truman had a presidential order that had the integration of the armed forces. And during the Korean War, the African Americans served alongside as opposed to World War II, where they were segregated units.
Do you see that the returning veterans are still fighting discrimination now? Or do you think some of what your organization has done has helped change the view of returning veterans?
I think it's different now, and in the sense that the overt racism, the type of ethnic separation has changed, but there's still some barriers that are there, in particular within the African American and the Latino veterans, in that when they return, they're similar to society. Their unemployment rates are much higher. Here in California, we have unemployment rates of somewhere around 8%, whereas the average for Mexican Americans is pretty close to 16 to 20%, depending on the numbers that you're looking at. And so that's one of the areas. Also in the educational areas, we are not really, in terms of the idea of higher education and learning. Unfortunately, within those areas, we have a 50% dropout rate within our communities, and a lot of times what happens is that our returning veterans are caught into this slow trap of not really looking at it in terms of being able to achieve that level of education. It's very difficult in terms of going through your whole life being made less than. And as Martin Luther King said, you know, when people say that about human rights or civil rights, they always say, well, wait. For most of us that are minorities, wait almost means never, that you're not going to be able to get those types of amenities and rights that most other people have. If you look at Stanislaus County, we have basically de facto segregation in most of our areas. in terms of West Modesto, South Modesto, and in West Turlock, and pockets of just areas where there was in the past the segregation of the ethnic groups. And so again, you know, it's a very difficult thing for returning veterans to come to deal with.
It's interesting because now, in 2012, it seems almost a way of life, the integration of people within communities. And I grew up in a Latino community very much, and so I grew up gleaning the fields and working with migrant workers. So I don't think that I was exposed to the segregation quite as much as other people maybe of my color. And I don't...
Well, and you're younger too.
Well, and that's what I was going to bring up. It seems as though in 2012 we take so much for granted as far as integration is concerned, and segregation not happening as much as it used to. But
in the 60s,
yeah, I was going
just
to
in
ask.
there, just for an example, here in Stanislaus County, there were areas in the counties where we couldn't go buy to stores where Mexicans were not. In fact, it said no Mexicans allowed in some of the areas. And California was way ahead of the curve in terms of integration, because they had court laws before Brown versus the Board of Education in terms of integration of California. However, within the Valley has always been at least 20, 30 years behind in terms of racial politics as compared to Los Angeles or the Bay Area. So we're right now, the way I look at it, we're going really through our 70s here in the Valley, and people are beginning to see that, you know, the whole idea of Southwest Modesto really being basically a Black and Latino area is really something. And if you look at the type of services that we receive in those areas, you know, we don't have street lights, we don't have sidewalks, we don't have drains and gutters. I mean, much of that area, you know, it has, and one of the things that the city says is, well, it's a county pocket. The county says, well, then it costs too much to really do it so that we can integrate it into the city. However, they've received millions of dollars over the years in community development grants to be able, and transportation funds, federal transportation funds, where they could begin to do some of those projects. Where they've mainly put those projects have been in the north side and in new development and in resurfacing the streets around the McHenry areas and the downtown areas of Modesto, not on the west or the south sides.
Well, you were saying we're kind of in our 70s now. You mean like the decade of the 1970s?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Because I was going to...
I say we're 30 years,
yeah.
30 to 40 years behind.